All right, everybody, we're at the top of the hour. It is officially 2 o'clock. We are going to go ahead and get this webinar rolling. My name is Earl Lang. I'm a Senior Integrated Marketing Manager here for Dude Solutions, and I'm going to be moderating today's webcast where we'll be taking you through a 2019 year in review of TheWorxHub for healthcare. I'm going to do very little talking today. Pat Tierney, who is our Enterprise Solutions Consultant for healthcare, is going to take us through today's presentation. But before I officially pass it off to him, who'll get to all the meaty, juicy details that you guys all want to hear about today, I'm just going to take you through some brief housekeeping so you can kind of understand how the event's set up today. Phone lines have been muted on y'all's end. That's more to just decrease background noise than anything. We don't want that to, not encourage you from participating, right? So there are plenty of ways to do that. There's a Q&A feature there for if you have any questions, please submit those. I'll be directly monitoring those throughout today's event. Might be able to answer some in real time via chat if they're more technical, but we'll save the bulk of them for the Q&A, which will be at the end of today's presentation, where we'll be able to get into any of those questions that you might have. If for whatever reason it's more detailed and we can't get you an answer today, we've obviously got your information and we'll make sure we follow up accordingly after the webinar concludes. If you do have other technical issues, there's also a chat function. You can submit requests that way. If you're having trouble hearing, just let me know and I'll keep an eye on that as well. But that's about it on my end. Thank you guys for attending. We're very excited to have you with us today, and I'm going to pass it over to Pat, who's going to take us through all the greatest and latest with TheWorxHub for healthcare. Pat?
Perfect. Yeah, thanks, Earl. Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, wherever you may be calling in from. My name is Patrick Tierney, and one of the solutions consultants here on the TheWorxHub team for several years now, and happy to have you guys on. Hopefully everyone's having a great Thursday and hopefully has some kind of a vacation lined up somewhere in the near future around the holidays. Not featured on this slide that you can see, but someone I was able to wrangle in, Josh Malbaga. We're lucky enough to bring him in for a little bit more intel on what we've been doing and what we're up to next year. Josh is one of the co-founders of the TheWorxHub and the director of sales here, so I'll let him say hello and we'll get going.
Thanks, Pat. Really happy to be here and, well, looking forward to sharing with everyone the hard work that we've been under for the past year, building out the solution.
Perfect. Yeah, thanks, Josh. Yeah, a lot of stuff been going on. So we do this at the end of every year. So I'll pop up a quick agenda just to make sure that we're all on the same page. The purpose of this webinar is really to kind of take stock of what has transpired in the last year. There's a lot of work that you guys have all done as clients, a lot of work that we've done to make the solution better and more usable. We know that you're busy, so when we're going to go through some of these new feature launches, we want to maybe shed some light on some things that you may have missed. We know that you're busy running your facilities, so we'll typically send out some updates to let you know about new things that come out every couple of weeks, but this is a chance to maybe see some of the ones that may have slipped through. And then
and as you're looking at this and learning about these new features, if something strikes your fancy and you weren't aware of it, keep in mind we've got our support lines that you can give a call to, and they can help you take advantage of these new pieces that were built into the core. And we'll have a poll at the end if you're interested in some of the new modules we've built out.
Yeah. And then one of the things that we will finish up on as well around that time is it's kind of a sneak peek into the 2020 roadmap. So while we've been able to do a whole slew of releases this year, we've got a whole list of things that we've got queued up for next year. So really excited to share some of that. So with that, I'll bring us forward here and talk a little bit about some of the numbers as we kind of looked back at the year in review. Some monster numbers, definitely a growth year. Here at TheWorxHub. So right now, the way we looked at it, we've got about 13.5 million new work orders that were processed through the system. About 4.5 million new labor hours that were tracked in total through the TheWorxHub, and almost 340,000 new assets that were entered collectively for all of our clients. So monster numbers that were put up there. We're really happy to see a lot of this.
Yeah, and as you think about those, just to put them kind of in sort of big numbers, it's hard to imagine what they actually mean. On the work order side, we're basically talking about a work order every 2 seconds is being added to the TheWorxHub. So that's kind of the throughput that we're seeing. And in terms of the labor hours, that's about 640,000 person days of labor being tracked in the system. So imagine all the wrench turning, the PMs that have been done, all that type of stuff. And then on the asset side, that's about 1,300 assets being added per day. Where we do see the asset side being really interesting when we chart it in graphs, there's these big upticks. We've started to build out data collection services. We found that a lot of communities, organizations, hospitals were having challenges collecting all of their assets. So we actually have kind of SWAT teams that we can send out that'll go out, collect all your assets and barcode them for you, load them into the system. And that's really helped us improve the number of assets that we're tracking, which then improves the data that you, on the end user side, can actually collect in terms of being able to attach work orders to assets, get true costing on repairs, be able to make repair versus replace decisions, monitor warranties, things like that. So I'm really happy to see these numbers kind of on that up and to the right trajectory.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was happy to see them going kind of up and to the right. I can't wait to see what next year looks like. So I expect these numbers will continue to climb up. We've got a few more numbers here to share. If we're looking at number of users that are entered into the system, about 87,000 new users entered in across all of our clients. And then on our side, support cases, about 13,000. Support cases taking into consideration all the times you have to pick up the phone or you want to learn about a new feature or anything like that. 13,000 support cases, so good to see there. And then 24 new software releases over 2019. So yeah, Josh, thoughts on some of these numbers?
I mean, the software releases, think of that as 24 sleepless nights for our development team and our release team. They set these up so that they're doing those releases, at midnight, at 1 in the morning, making sure it doesn't interrupt your day, so that when you come in the morning, you've got something fresh and new, but it hasn't messed with any of the stuff you are used to. That's been really important to us, is to make sure that as we add on to the system, we're not, messing around with your day-to-day workflows. We're setting this up so that the releases and all of the improvements are incremental. We're pushing out new training resources on those through the help site to get those out there. I'll also mention, relative to those support cases, every time you call in for support and share a story like, I wish the software could do this, or you talk to one of our sales team members, or you're interviewed for one of our success stories and you're sharing those ideas, those are incredibly valuable to us. We've built out an internal tool called TheWorxHub, our idea portal. So it's the idea portal. And all of our team members take those pieces of advice, suggestions, and criticisms. We got thick skins, we can take it. We take all of those suggestions and we build that into a tool where then we can track kind of how frequently we're hearing these suggestions and translate those into our roadmap and our development plan. And we were able to actually release 74 new features this year based directly on the feedback from people using the software on a day-to-day basis, which is really phenomenal. That was great. It's great to have people engaged enough to give us that feedback and to have a great development team that can take those ideas and execute on them and deliver something that actually impacts the hospitals that we work with.
Yeah, I was happy to see some of those numbers as well. I know that a lot of organizations talk about, talking the talk and walking the walk. When we say we're listening, we really are. So I'm glad to see that we were able to deliver on a good bit of those new releases based on the feedback. So that's great. So those are basically some of the numbers from last year that we thought would be relevant to share. Want to keep us moving here and get into really the meat and potatoes of this, which is really what we were able to push out in 2019. Now, the majority of the things that I want to kind of walk us through here today will be things that you today can go into your account and open up and access. There's one exception here. This first one that we'll look at, space management. This was one that is now an add-on module that is available. We can kind of talk through some of the ways that you can get more info, but I want to introduce this as a release that we had done, I guess would have been back in August of this year, right around the ASHI show. So basically, this is think of all the data that you have in your WorxHub software program right now. Space management can become essentially the digital twin of your drawings that merges all of that data that comes forward. So I think we had found that a lot of people were using different ways to store this information. If you had paper scrolls with all your floor plans and life safety drawings, digital files that were stored somewhere else, the common thread was that they weren't accessible, at least as it related to your CMMS. So we built this out. It's really an intuitive way to explore your rooms, explore your spaces, to overlay those with the work orders and asset data, to streamline the assignment of those work orders to locations, to really shorten the onboarding time for things like new staff members or even contractors that don't know where everything is. But the driving force really behind a lot of this development, as you can see some of the videos scrolling through, is the life safety drawings, the ability to, after you've uploaded those floor plans, incorporate those life safety drawings like the exit lights, the means of egress, your water and gas shutoffs. There's even some abilities, you can see some of the color coding there that refers to how you're utilizing that actual space, whether it's more patient care related or administrative, even drilling down per department. So lots of great things that we've been able to do here. Josh, I'm sure you've got some thoughts on what we've been able to do so far.
Yeah.
What's upcoming?
Well, with this, I think it's really a great representation of our larger vision of taking kind of all of the areas that facilities touches on a day-to-day, month-to-month, week-to-week basis and integrating them into one system. So where we see people running with, on the rounding side, one solution for their environment of care rounds, one system for their PM in some cases, one for their work orders, another to manage the space drawings. Our kind of vision overall of where we want to get to is to take all of these areas and put them into one centralized solution so that you have one interface, one place to find it. Everything is connected. And we've done that really well now with the environment of care rounds, the maintenance, the asset management, the capital planning, the space management, and we're just going to keep on this path over the next number of years. We'll get more into this in terms of what's coming up, but Biomed, next piece that we're going to roll in as part of this integrated solution. We're rolling out an energy package for energy management that in the beginning, because of complexities, will be separate, but we're working on ways to loop that in to the actual work order management side of things and integrate those. And I think that's really what our kind of place in the industry overall is looking at hospitals and healthcare as a unique set of needs that really needs to be connected and integrated, and space management is one of those pieces that ties a lot of this together. Plus, it's a really great way to visualize data and see it right there.
That's probably one of the big ones, and when I've shown this off to people in regular demonstrations, they're just like, if I can see it, it makes so much more sense to me. So that's been great feedback so far. We'll have kind of a poll question later on. If you're obviously not using this application now, ways that we can get you more information and that you can kind of bring this into your portfolio. So there's another piece to this space that is probably worth mentioning, that you do have the ability to allow your frontline users to actually be able to select their locations of where they want to place a request. So this should be helping to drive towards getting more accurate data. So think about starting from like a campus map. If you've got a few different buildings, and a user could select the campus, select the building, drill down to the floor, and instead of them not knowing the room number, using this map to be able to get them where they need to be, so you know where to go. So nice little enhancement that I think that are little things that will continue to bake into there as far as the space management. Moving on here, so the asset risk assessments. This is something that's existed in the software, it exists in there now. We had just found that there was need to make it a bit more flexible. This lines up with more of what the letter of the law is for the NFPA utility risk assessments and the adoption of that by accrediting bodies. The updates that we've made refer directly back to how you can do the risk scoring and then the risk threshold settings. So you can essentially create multiple risk thresholds. If you were used to using it before, it was kind of binary. It was essentially you could do, it was either non-high risk or high risk. Now we've built it out so that you can do multiple thresholds. If you're familiar with doing this sort of categories 1 through 4 that's outlined in NFPA 99, with category 1 being most likely to cause major injury, and category 4 being, not likely to have any impact on patient care. It allows for you to do that more nuanced categorization with some of these updates that we've pushed out. This is something that you have live now. So in other words, you could essentially go into your settings right now. If you click into the risk category all the way to the top right, it'll bring you to a guide. There's these in-app guides that you've probably seen where if you're interested in using that feature, there's these little walkthroughs, these step-by-step tutorials that say, if you want to use this risk and categorization, here's how you would do it. So hopefully you all have seen some of this. And can start to take advantage of, what's required from things like the Joint Commission, DNV, and some of the other ones that use these type of scoring mechanisms here. This feeds right into the reporting sides of the software as well. So if you're looking to do PM completions on your category 1 assets, we'll be able to allow for that. So we're going to continue to do this, and this will play a part when we look at, and Josh had mentioned the Biomed app that we're looking at releasing here in 2020. That's going to be a bit more asset forward, so we had to make some adjustments with these risk assessments. So this is a good way to get us going in that direction as well. So Josh, anything else to add, or ways this thing kind of plays a part?
Just that, this is part of our commitment to continually update the solution to make sure that we're delivering what you actually need. We acknowledge that the first round of the risk assessment, it worked okay, but it missed some of the utility risk assessment requirements for NFPA 99. This was rolled out, I think, 2 weeks ago, so it is relatively new, maybe even a week ago. I know we had to delay it because of Thanksgiving and realized that we didn't want to push out a brand new update right before Thanksgiving and give people something new to learn. So we waited till just afterwards. But it's just part of our ongoing commitment to making sure that we're building a solution that really fits within the hospital environment.
Yeah, I think it's one of those that, like as it relates to compliance, the most common question is, are you guys keeping up with the most recent standards and things like that? Hopefully this is a testimony that we are absolutely committed to doing that.
And we're going to send you out to more boot camps for all the rounding and Joint Commission stuff, right, Pat? Great fun.
It sounds fun. It's great. It's just 16 hours of, TJC codes. It's great. So sign me up. So yeah, so I did like that last one, allow people to dig in a little bit more. The next one to kind of cover is push notifications. So these are in-browser notifications. Right now, this is being supported through Chrome, Firefox, Microsoft Edge, and Android. The goal here being that you don't always have to have the TheWorxHub open. You don't have to monitor your email. This is going to tie back to new requests and new assignments. So it's not going to work for Safari users. Sorry, guys. Hopefully that's coming soon enough. But the idea is if you're at a desktop or a mobile, you get real-time push notifications. If you click into that actual notification, it'll take you straight to the record. So hopefully it's sort of shortening that time to completion by driving action even when you're not looking directly at the TheWorxHub. So good way to stay engaged even though you're not staring directly at your dashboard.
Yeah, really great for folks who need to be accepting requests and need that reminder that, hey, that's there. Gives you a much faster response time. I don't recommend turning this on if you're not, actively engaged in day-to-day management of work orders. I made the mistake of turning this on for a couple of our demo sites, and I got a lot of pop-ups, let's put it that way. But it's really meant for people who need that reminder, hey, go check, there's a new request. I wouldn't use this if you're just overseeing it. We've built some great dashboards to give you pictures of what's been done today, how many labor hours have been tracked. There's this pulse tab that you can use that I would use more from a management level. This is more from an operations perspective.
Yeah. So, moving along here, I think, and this next one is in our most recent release that you were talking about there, Josh, which is this idea of doing round robin assignments. Now, in talking with a lot of the healthcare facilities that we work with, some of them employed sort of a like a next man up approach, either because they didn't have like a dispatcher that was sitting down in front of a desk that was sending them off one off at a time. Or the other thing I've heard is just essentially they didn't have the time to make, to spend time on low value decisions. So this essentially is a way that you can take off, like right now you can set up teams within the TheWorxHub, a group of people that maybe belong to a certain trade or handle a certain building. This takes it to another level. So by leveraging this, it's automating it, the cycling of assignments per technician. So you can take your existing teams, you convert them into round robin queues. You can kind of finesse the who the members are of that. Maybe you want a broader membership on a general team, and then when it cycles through all the round robin members, it doesn't find anybody. When it lands on a team, you can have a broader visibility across a large team group. So I want to look at an example just to kind of show you where this kind of might be useful. So I'll walk us through essentially a basic workflow. So I've got a team set up with a couple members for a round robin. We'll say Diego and Kyle are the two members that are in this queue. So Diego's first up, the request comes in. It basically looks, is Diego working during this time? And I should mention on the previous screen, I'll back it up just in case we didn't quite see that. There's a couple permissions here that say, should we consider if this worker is away based on their working hours? So we can do some things on a per user basis to help us to figure out if that person is working that day or if they're, say, off on vacation, something like that. So the system can look at those settings, and if he is working right now, perfect. We'll go ahead and drop that in his queue. He'd get that work order and then in turn move to the bottom of the queue. Now we'll say if Diego was not working in this scenario, his hours were listed as on vacation or something else, it would skip Diego and go to Kyle because he's next up in the queue. Then the system looks at Kyle and says, is he working now? The answer is yes. Perfect. We'll assign Kyle and then move him to the bottom of the queue. Now, if we've gone through these two members and neither one of them are working, what it'll do is it'll essentially bypass the two and then assign it to a team. So now this will wait until member of this team basically assigns it to themselves. There's different workflows we can support, but the idea is there's some logic that you can use to your benefit to get this to the next person up, but still take into account when or not essentially they're working for that day. Josh,
yeah, I'll just add that what's really awesome about this is Pat explained all of that in about 45 seconds. The actual flow in the software would happen instantaneously. It's all automated. So as soon as the request comes in, it's and then it's routed out. So huge time saver just from not having to have someone think through all of these decisions really great to apply to kind of predictable corrective work orders. So when you're getting started, using this type of round robin team on corrective templates, really basic things might be a good place to start, light change, temperature issue, something where you've set up a template that applies to a task that can be done by a team that all has pretty much the same skills. You don't want to have a round robin setup that's grabbing, your level 3 technician and giving them jobs that level 1s could be doing.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, great for general labor. If we're talking too hot, too cold, just general things. I think the idea is let's get it from a request in the hands of a technician sooner than later for some of those just kind of all-purpose ones. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, this is live and up and running now. Again, you can go to this portion in the software in your settings and start to look at those in-app notifications to help you to guide on how to set these up. All right. One of the things that kind of dovetails nicely into this is this next enhancement around skipping the request status template. So it kind of brings some more firepower if you pair it up with the round robin feature. So this allows requests using those templates that you might already have set up to route directly to an assignment. So a template can basically be assigned to an individual, a team, or like we just looked at, a round robin team. Now, normally these are, common and predictable work orders. Lights out, it's too hot, it's too cold. But the way the TheWorxHub is traditionally set up is there was kind of a safety net set up. Like a request would be made, someone would have to sort of approve it, and then before it was dispatched. This new feature will allow us to kind of bypass that a little bit where it makes sense.
And coupled with the round robin feature, that means that requests that use the template that come in go right to someone as soon as they're submitted.
Mm-hmm. Yep, again, quicker time from request to the point where someone's in front of the job squaring it away, so sooner than later.
Mm-hmm.
Oh. All right. Well, let's switch gears here a little bit. This next one kind of gets us more to the cost tracking and budgeting part of this discussion. So previously, the cost allocation tracking was a little bit manual in the TheWorxHub, and it wasn't really all that accessible in like a live work order. So we've added this panel you can see to the left to the work order side. So it's available from desktop and from mobile, but essentially it allows you to have more control over logging costs on work orders. Think about things like labor, inventory, that stuff automatically being tallied here through just your normal time tracking. There's timer functionality that you could use that will automatically feed into this, as well as parts consumption. You could also use this area for things like your ad hoc purchases, if you have to run out to Home Depot and grab something, or if there were scenarios like a service cost, like a third party that you were bringing in. So the account budget codes that you see on each cost are pretty key because they get you into more some of the advanced budgeting, which we'll look at here in just a second, which essentially is they bundle nicely together. We're doing some of the work order cost tracking, and that will bring us into how you can start to put this into different buckets or budgets sort of going forward.
Yeah, and my one ask of everyone here is if you can log costs, especially on assets, you're going to get such a higher return in terms of the data in the software. I find that not, in my opinion, not enough people are tracking costs, and it makes some of the repair versus replace reporting components of the software just not work as well. If we don't have the cost, we can't tell you when you've spent more than a certain percentage of the purchase cost of an asset. So do think about that if you're not tracking those now. And the next screens that Pat shares will give even more kind of reasons why tracking costs becomes more interesting now.
Yeah, and that's it. We don't want to have just cost tracking for the sake of cost tracking. We want to see where it fits in relation to our budget. So if you're interested in that, it's useful to start to set up some of these budgets in the system. So if you're in your settings, you're on work order, there's a budgets tab inside of this. Now, I've talked to sites that literally have gigantic spreadsheets where this is all being entered in manually. And you can imagine, and maybe you're someone's on the call that does that, it's pretty labor intensive. So with this new budget feature, you can use the account budget code on work order costs, and you can roll them up, those work order costs, into annual budgets, right? So you can see some samples of the ones I've got here. Maybe you've got a parts budget pool or a maintenance labor pool, capital expenses. You can start to track your year-to-date and your percentage of that budget much, much easier. If you're already using this, I don't know that there's a ton of people using this right now, but if you are, just remember to kind of update those for 2020, or else it's just going to copy over what you had from the previous year. But I think this is a good way to maybe start getting a better hold of where your money or where your resources are going for your facilities team. And then this kind of brings us, one of the things we understand, that looking at every single work order and assigning a cost and like assigning a specific budget code to it, again, can be a bit onerous. So like with a lot of the things within the TheWorxHub, we set defaults wherever possible, right? So business rules when it actually makes sense. So you can see on this enhancement here for the budgeting, we can set defaults on some of these. That can apply to staff, to contractors, or for inventory. So an example could be something like you've got a specific budget for contractor labor, and he gets used a majority of the time. You could set that up to default to that use in the settings, but you could also have a specific contractor that the only time he gets involved is for capital projects. In those cases, you could override the budget code on their contractor record to your capital improvement budget. So anytime they're accumulating costs on work orders, their costs will automatically be applied to your capital budget instead of the default budget. Okay, so default's where it makes sense, but there's still going to be some abilities to override it to get it to the right place.
Yeah, and this is just part of that whole idea of making sure that when we roll new features out, we make them easier for you to adopt if you're going to take a simpler approach and not have a ton of different budget codes. Make it so it's really easy to take advantage of this new stuff. So that's a simple one that you can default things to, kind of like a set it and forget it till the start of the next year, at which point you have to update your budgets.
There you go. And hopefully there's more money in that budget, right? So. Yeah, here's for hoping. So that's a good bit on the budget and costs. Moving on to kind of a newer thing that we rolled out here. Some people didn't notice this one. This was in the past maybe month or two. Traditionally, the TheWorxHub has required that all users have a login to access the system. Until we rolled out this public request piece, because we found that it's not always feasible for every person that interacts with the facilities team to have a login for the TheWorxHub. There's scenarios that we've talked to clients where they had like, if you have like a mixed space and you have a tenant that's on the property, but you still want them to be able to place requests, you could set up essentially a public request. It's an open URL where they could have things like a kiosk or a tablet set up. They could walk up, submit a request, but not have a login and password to have to do so. It's still going to ask for a name. It's still going to ask for a phone number, but it makes it possible for them to submit a request without having to set up each individual user in the system. So I think there's some different use cases where it might be useful, but Josh, I know you have some thoughts on this.
Yeah, I mean, I love this for exactly as you just said, Pat, for people who aren't staff members, where we've got tenants, we want that kiosk set up. But if it's your staff, I really encourage people to have them use the kind of authenticator or the logged in feature, because it allows them to see the status of their requests. You'll see on this view, it's just a one-way street, essentially. I'm adding a ticket and that's it. I can't see what's already in that location or anything like that. And we have to do that because this is not behind a login. So it's great for that. If you've got staff, keep in mind we do have the option of a single sign-on, Active Directory type integration that will basically create those users in the system for you once they try to log in, and eliminate the need for them to store another password in their head or something like that. But to be clear, for the non-staff members, tenants is a great option, and it's there if you need it.
Yeah, so this is an option for you. Again, use some caution. Last bit, you can see kind of in the bottom right, there's a little reCAPTCHA sort of logo down there. So it is protected against, malicious bots and all that kind of crazy stuff. So, it has a level of protection to it, but still want to think through your own security protocols before deploying. Okay, so that's public requests. Moving on to location rollup on reports. This is something that I think we'd known was a little bit of a shortcoming for a while. When you're setting up locations in your account, like in my example, I've got a series of buildings. It's kind of a parent tree location. When it came to reporting on this, it was a little bit challenging to go, compare this building versus this, like number of work orders, the cost, how much did we spend in this building last year versus another? So we made some updates. So now you'll be able to essentially aggregate the data in those reports to the top level of those buildings. So in several of the reports, if you're used to getting into the reporting section, in the top right of those reports, there's an area where you can select the grouping. How is it broken out on the report? Location rollup now shows up on many of those. So for things like cost time analysis, if I wanted to break it out per building, there's a nice clean way to run those reports. So you can really start to see where your resources are going, or maybe an older building is really trending in the wrong direction and we want to take a closer look there. So nice little just small feature to update the reporting. So thought that was worth mentioning. Moving on to inventory. So for those of you that are using inventory, this is a sort of a small add-on module as part of one of the additional apps that are available. This would apply to you if you're using it. Basically, based on the feedback and the data, we found that there was really too many clicks involved when you're talking about assigning, editing, and consuming inventory, and that's both from a desktop and from mobile. Now it's a bit more streamlined to make an assumption on how many you're assigning in a quantity. When we looked at some of the data, we've got some things kind of at HQ to look at the data and how people are clicking around in the software. So we found that 86% of assigned inventory was a quantity of 1. So before previously this update, it always defaulted to 0. So you had to do further steps to change it from 0 to 1 and do a few other steps where it was just unnecessary. So now consuming an item is just a single click. It'll start off at 1. You could still change it from 1 to 2 or 3 or anything else. But estimated probably can cut you down on about 75% of time spent just in the assignment and consumption of the inventory. So we know that inventory tracking in of itself is a tough process. So we don't want one of the barriers or one of the challenges to be the software side. So little tweak here on this side. Now, Josh, I know that this one isn't like the sexiest feature we can talk to, but maybe overall, do you want to talk to kind of how we use our internal tools to kind of, do some of this stuff?
And I think that's really, this is a great example of how we're not just looking at how do we build something new to sell. We're actually looking at how is the stuff that people have in their hands being used on a day-to-day basis, and are we filling things in the right way, and are we looking at ways to reduce the number of clicks that you have to go through? And this is a perfect example where having a 0 in the quantity field meant that 75 times out of 100, when someone goes to assign an inventory, they had to do 3 extra clicks. By just filling that in, we can eliminate that. And we're constantly looking throughout the application for little things like this. Some you'll never notice, because it'll just be like, oh, I don't have to do that again, and never think about it again. And some will call out like this, just so you're aware of the types of things that we're doing. This is the stuff that I love.
Yeah, it's great. It's little time savers. Most staffs that we talk to you're already stretched on time and resources. So if we can make incremental changes to get some time back, then I think that's a win for everybody. So I'd say that one is a good example. Even this next one, while it seems like on the surface a small change, things like faster pick lists, where traditionally you'd have to click the drop down and search through maybe potentially a long list. Now you can just do sort of a smart search to pick up on those categories. So this is showing up in the work orders and a few other areas where we're going to continue to, again, if we can save you, a few seconds here and there, that adds up a great deal over time. So faster pick lists, those are starting to show up and make it a bit quicker. This next one, this is something we've had the ability to do for a while when we talk about making requests, the ability to put like a banner at the top of that page that has some type of text in it, right? So something that says, hey, maybe we're pointing back to certain protocols. Make sure you do this, or if it's an emergency, pick up the phone and call. The enhancement that we made for this was the ability to make it bold, italicize it, or even to embed a web link into it. So, and it really kind of enhanced that visibility of these messages. You could put things in there like, hyperlinks to internal policies and procedures, training materials, and this will apply to both the traditional work request page that you're typically using, as well as that public request form that I popped up earlier. So just another way to kind of push some info to those frontline users. So hopefully, most of the people on this call, we've been going through a lot of this stuff. You're used to using the TheWorxHub, and know that there's a help site link at the top right portion of any page that you're on. But not only does it have all that help site content with like all the major features and applications, but it's also where we post everything like the stuff we've talked about today, everything that's new. So if you go to the help site and you click on the What's New button, it'll take you through the most recent release notes, right? So the last one that we pushed out. And I think, again, from the beginning of the webinar, you saw we did about 24 last year. So every couple of weeks, there should be something. If you click on that, it'll bring you to the most recent release. And if you scroll all the way to the bottom of that, there's an archive link that you can hit to see all of the releases. So a good way to look backwards in case you missed this webinar or any of the recent updates that we push out as notifications.
And keep in mind that the first time you log in after we do a release, you'll get a little pop-up down at the bottom that gives you a link directly to the release notes. So we do make it easy for you to see it, but I find a lot of the time people forget or ignore that because you're going in the system to do something and you don't necessarily want to read release notes right then. So we give you that history there so you can go back and check them out.
Yeah, always there whenever you're ready. So, well, great. Well, I think that takes us through the kind of the bulk of the new features and where you can find them. So moving ahead a little bit, there was another announcement we wanted to kind of put out there. If Josh, you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so really exciting. The TheWorxHub was a Vision Award winner for 2019 in the category of Smart Buildings, IoT, and Software. So basically, the award was there because of the approach we're taking in terms of building solutions that actually work in the hospitals, the organizations that we're serving. We've gotten really high marks on the ease of use, but also the actual fit for the people that we're serving. So we're really honored to have received this and recognition both of the work that we're doing and the work that we're working towards in 2020, which I think is what's next, right? 2020 focus?
I think that's it.
All right. So I can talk a little bit about this one. If we go to the next slide, this will give you some idea of what's on our roadmap. So essentially, over the course of really the first 3 quarters of 2020. Fourth quarter, we're still in flux on in terms of exactly what's going to foot in there. We're building out some significant improvements. So number one, we're taking that space management piece that Pat shared with us and integrating it with our rounding, our environment of care rounding tool, so that you can actually see your rounds on the map and make it easier to identify where things are. We're doing a brand new application, a whole new department. We're going to be looking at biomed and how we can take what we've done on the facilities engineering side and do that on the biomed piece. Lots of changes in terms of how we do that. We're not just going to take what we do for maintenance and say, hey, biomed folks, here you go. We're actually looking at this from the perspective of what does a biomed individual need from the perspective of managing the whole environment they're responsible for. We've hired subject matter expert to help us with this. We've got a team that's focused on building it out. That should be there come March, April. So watch for some info on that. As part of that, we've got to overhaul our file management systems. So this is how you can actually connect files to the TheWorxHub. We're going to be doing a complete overhaul, and that will impact facilities as well. So you'll get a new tool that will make it much easier to upload documents, share them amongst common assets, search for them, things like that. We're also refining our reporting. We've had a lot of requests to start, instead of tracking response time on work orders by day, to drill it into time by the hour. How many hours did we actually take to respond to these? So we're going to be overhauling that. And we're rolling out an improved compliance dashboard with reporting that goes with that. We're looking at temp sensors and how we can actually integrate with those so that we can get auto feeds of temperature readings, and then associated with that, be able to set thresholds so we can provide alerts or automated work orders when things fall out of range. We're looking at building out our barcode scanning functions in the software so that we no longer rely on the pick to shop app. We've had a number of people who don't like the fact that they have to actually install something to do barcoding, even though if you're using the barcodes we print, it is the free version you can use. We're going to be eliminating that and rolling out basically native barcode scanning within the application. And then also, because the TheWorxHub, because we have some pretty significant kind of vision on where we want to take the software, we're going to be doing some modifications to the UI just to better show you information. I think the next slide, Pat, has a sample of this, right? Mm-hmm. So this is an idea of what we're looking to overhaul. It's not out yet, for a staff record. So before, you used to come in and see users and you have to click through to find a bunch of data on them. We want to integrate all this data, give you one place to come and see it. So here, imagine coming in and seeing a maintenance technician, seeing their kind of metrics in terms of how they're doing with response time, how they're doing with satisfaction scores, and then also being able to manage the users from here. So you're going to start to see an evolution. This is not a revolution. This is not like we're overhauling the complete application or anything like that. We're just updating things incrementally to make it easier for you to use and default to showing you actionable information right when you find a screen or locate someone. And that goes back to us also using those tools where we're tracking essentially how the software is used to determine why people search for a particular thing, and then leveraging that information to adjust our screen so that that's what we show you without you having to click through. So pretty exciting stuff there. Now, with this comes the need to get kind of user experience testing. So this is where we've got an ask of folks. If you're interested, we're putting together a new user experience group. So I think Earl just threw a poll up for us there. If you'd be interested in participating in our new user experience group, it's not complex. It's not onerous. It's, you know, maybe a couple of calls and a view just to see what's there. You'll be able to get an advanced view of what we're working on, give us your honest feedback of how it works, and that's it. So if you fill that out, one of our team will be in touch. Give it another second or two to get that going. All right. The yes, no, I'm going to assume everybody's answered. So if we move on now, one more slide before we get to some questions and a final poll. Wanted to make sure everyone was aware of Dude University. This is our annual user conference. It's a pretty phenomenal event. We're talking about 1,100 facilities people coming together in one location for 3.5 days of sessions, both on the software, but also on topics that matter from personal and professional development. We get some great guest speakers in. It's a huge opportunity for you to connect with your peers. Really encourage you to check it out. It's in Raleigh. Nice time of year. It's not too hot. It's really great. So do consider that if you're looking at how you can get more out of the TheWorxHub or looking at how you really ramp up. One of my favorite things about Dude University is the lab. So we actually have a lab this year. I think we're doubling the number of computers, Pat, that we have, correct?
That's what I heard. Yeah, it was about double, and we extended the hours to be open on Sunday. So it's definitely one of the hot places to be for the user conference.
So you can come in. We've got 200 computers set up. You can sit down, and one of our support or implementation and training folks will come and kind of one-on-one answer whatever questions you have. So it's a really great event. Now, with that in mind, Earl, I think we have one last poll. If anybody's interested in learning more about the various applications that we have, basically we've built out functions for space management, the survey and inspection piece, capital planning, long-range plans, PO and inventory, security for rounds, housekeeping. WorxIQ is our kind of benchmarking and dashboarding BI tool. Energy management, we didn't really talk much about that. That's something you're going to be hearing a lot more about next quarter. It's a great energy management solution. And then finally, Dude University. If anyone's interested in any of those, check off as many as you'd like, and we can go from there.
Yeah, thank you for that, Josh. Poll is live, just for all of you guys who Josh just mentioned. You should see that on your screen here right now. Sorry, Josh, you can continue.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, that's right, Earl. You were going to talk about that. I just started on a roll and keep going. I apologize.
He was rolling, Earl. So let him go.
So with that, while people are filling that out, if anyone has any questions, please do post them in the poll there, or not the poll, the Q&A section. Got about 5 minutes left. Happy to answer any questions people might have. Give a second for one or two.
If we'll leave about 30 seconds left with this poll and allow some questions to trickle in. No questions have come through just yet, which means our presenters have done a great job covering most of the material today. So we'll keep that available and open for the audience here for the next 30 seconds as we close out the poll, and we'll go from there.
Well, yeah. Josh, I guess the question on everyone's mind is all your Christmas shopping done this year? You're waiting to the last minute like you usually do.
Well, I'm happy to say that, everyone's done except for one special person who, well, she's probably not going to listen to me here. It's my wife. I still got to get her present.
Oh, yeah. Wait till Christmas Eve. You'll be fine.
Well, it looks like don't have any questions come in, so we'll go ahead and up maybe one. There is a way. We had one come in from Karen. Karen, I can answer that question for you. The question is, she was late to join. Is there any way to see this presentation from the beginning? There sure will be. After the conclusion of today's event, we will trim down the recording, so it's a little bit from right from the beginning to the end for you guys, and what we'll do is we'll follow up with you directly after the webinar. Probably tomorrow or Monday, you'll receive an email from us that does include the link for the recording to all those who registered. So for whatever reason you didn't get a chance to watch the whole thing, no worries. We can get you that recording and we'll follow up accordingly. That being said, we'll go ahead and close out today's event. We want to thank everybody so much for joining us. Greatly appreciate y'all's time. And Josh and Pat, awesome job, and thank you guys for taking us through everything.
Absolutely.
Cool. Well, hope everybody has a great rest of your day, a great holiday season, and we will see you next time. Everybody take care.
Thank you. Have a great one.
Thanks, everybody.